Hello everyone. Um, this is a continuation of the series on introduction to web development. We're done with the first part. Now, in the first chapter, we discuss the web and what it entails, why the web was introduced, and many other aspects of the web. But in today's class, we'll be talking about the web page structure, that is, an introduction to HTML. What is HTML? HTML is a markup language that defines the structure of a web document. When we're talking about a web document, the web document we are actually referring to is web pages. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Each and every character in HTML stands for a thing. The first one stands for hyper, the second stands for text, the third stands for markup, and the last stands for language. Whereby hyper can simply be referred to as format. So hypertext, format text, or formatted text. HTML consists of series of elements which you use to enclose or wrap different parts of the content to make it appear a certain way or act a certain way. The enclosing tag can make a word or image hyperlinked to somewhere else, can interlice words, can make the font bigger or smaller, and so on. So, from what I was explaining about formatted text, why I said hyper means formatted, is because this HTML consists of tags that we make use of together with its content, is what we call element, that we make use of to determine how a certain content is being displayed or behave on the web page. So that's why it's called hypertext, mostly in text format. But apart from text, we can also include images, links, videos, and many others. Each HTML tag describes different document content. That is, each and every element tags that appears on a web page, that appears while writing a page, building a web page, determines a different document content. How different elements are displayed or behave. They are being determined by these tags. So every tag has the way they behave and interact. Now let's take an example. Now, what you are seeing by this side is an example of an HTML document. And if you run this kind of code, this is the result you get. This is how it will appear. Now let me explain. The first item on the document, which is your doc type, the doc type declaration defines the document type to be HTML. What this does is that it helps the browser to understand what type of document it is about to preview. So you're declaring the document to strictly become HTML. While the text between the first opening tag and the closing tag describes an HTML document. Now, what you see here is the opening section, and here is the closing section, which means after you made your doc type declare that this document is an HTML document, this section tells the browser that this is where the HTML document starts and this is where it ends. But whereby the doc type determines that the entire document is an HTML document. Now we have the head section. The text between the head and head closing head provide information about the document. I usually like to refer to an HTML document like a regular letter, a letter you send to people or you receive, whereby a letter has an heading and the body. The heading carries details about who the letter is coming from, who is sending to, and the title, like a detailed information about what the letter is all about. But the major aspect of the letter is in the body. That's the same way an HTML document also operates. So the text between the head opening tag and the head closing tag provide information about the document. Then we have the title. The text between the title opening tag and title closing tag provide title for the document, which means this determines the title of the document, the title that always shows in our nav, in our tabs, which I will show to you soon. Then we have the body. The text between the body and the body describes the visible page content, that's what is visible to the website. Although some of this process are no longer followed due to the current version of web page. As of this recording, as of the making of this video, HTML5 is still the one used. And in HTML5, it is not required you go through all this process by putting the doc type, HTML, head, and body. You can simply just make known of the title, and every content and everything becomes revealing. But before HTML5, it's required of every developer to go through this process. Although the doc type might be different, but it goes through the same process. The text between the P and the P describes a paragraph. That means when you want to write a paragraph in your website, that's why I said in the previous slide that we use the tag to determine how some content are being previewed. Now let's talk about the HTML tag itself. HTML tag keywords surrounded by angle braces. Example. Now this is an HTML tag. This is the closing tag. HTML tags normally comes in pair like this. That means it comes in the opening and the closing. The first tag in the pair is the start tag. The second tag is the end tag. The end tag is written like the start tag, but with a slash before the tag name. Meanwhile, the start tag is often called the opening tag, and the end tag is often called the closing tag. Now let's move ahead. Tools used in creating and displaying HTML files are. Now, whenever you want to create, as a developer, you want to create an HTML document, there are some certain tools that you should make use of. There are some certain tools that you should make use of, and those tools are listed below. We have what we call the code editor. These are tools used to create code as a developer, and we have what we call the web browser, which I explained in previous class, that it is used to display the content of a web page. Now let's talk about the code editor. Code editors are computer programs or applications used in creating and editing programming files and documents. If you want to create a programming file or document like HTML, you use this code editor. There are two types of editors. We have what we call the plain text editor, and we have what we call the integrated development environment, in short IDE. Now let's talk about the plain text editor. These are editors that edit plain text. Most of these plain text editors are embedded in operating systems installed in computers. These editors, some of them don't require you as a developer to install first. They already come with your operating system. Example is your notepad. A notepad is an editor that you can use to write any programming language that is plain text. Another example is text edits, text mint, and many others. Let's talk about the IDE. Unlike the integrated development environment, this editor that has graphical user interface, that's GUI, which enable users, programmers to reduce coding, has built-in automations tools, and help to debug easily. So as a developer, I will require you to understand the difference between these two, the plain text editor and the IDE. The IDE helps you as a developer to code easily. Why the plain text requires you as a developer to do every aspect yourself. Now, example is a Visual Studio Code, the one you're seeing by this side. The same code we wrote in the previous page can be written with either a plain text or an IDE. Example of IDE editors is Microsoft Visual Studio Code, Sublime Text, PyCharm, Android Studio, Adobe Dreamweaver, etc. We have many others IDEs. Now let's go talk about the code editor. Stated in the example above that the examples I showed you, the one I explained, those codes can be written using any editor, either plain text or IDE. To differentiate the type of program you're writing, you have to save the file with an extension of .html or .htm for HTML file. Otherwise, it will be saved and treated as the default extension of the editors, which might not be visible via the web browser. So, as a developer, when you want to save your document, whether you're using a plain text editor or you're using an IDE, you're expected to use a .html extension for HTML files or .html for HTML file. Otherwise, every editor has a default file extension. So if you don't specify, it will save automatically with the file extension of the IDE, which sometimes might not be visible to your browser. So I will always encourage you to check well before saving. Examples of how we name our files. We have this example. You can see we have index.html, contact us with no space, .html, about underscore us.htm, login.htm, many others. Now, if you notice that when you're putting naming it, we don't add space. Even if you look at the two words, contact us, we merge them together and contact us with an underscore. We use the underscore to signify the space there. So these are ways we write our files on while you're writing your code with an editor. Now let's talk about web browser. I said earlier, the purpose of a web browser is to read web resources like HTML and display them. What this simply means is that just as you have used your code editor to build a web resource like HTML, we actually make use of our web browser to display them. The browser does not display the HTML tags, but use them to determine how to display the document. Examples of web browsers are Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Safari, Opera Mini, etc. So these are examples of web browsers.